Good morning. Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? I've got problems with my in-ear monitors. They sound very, very strange indeed. I don't know what's going on with them. But good morning, everyone. Thank you very much indeed for being here. And Dan saying we're officially on here. And Dan, you clearly read my mind. Dan said this just before the show started. Good morning, Muck Heap Engineers. Here he asked seat warmers. Bear that in mind, because we're getting back to seat warmers a bit later on. And he says good morning to plant porn addicts alike. Good morning to Stefan Edwards, joining us probably from the Netherlands. Good morning to you, Stefan. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Another packed show, which I need to rattle through today because I'm off to the cricket later this afternoon. Me and my two boys are going to watch the cricket at the Oval, which I'm looking forward to enormously. I wish I could figure out what was going on with the sound in my ears, because it's awful today for some reason. Anyway, we've got loads and loads and loads of stuff to get on with. I'm not going to kick around for too long at the beginning, but I will just point out I dropped something in the chat last night in the WhatsApp group about the fact that Hitachi and Yanmar are exploring some kind of joint venture which would extend downwards the Hitachi range into more compact machines. Now, obviously, Hitachi have them in the excavator, so I'm not entirely sure where the cutoff is. And Al Grierson, who unfortunately doesn't make the show these days, but he said in the WhatsApp group there has been a long-standing deal between Hitachi and Mechalak, which does that replace it? Who the hell knows? Ken Hatchett, yeah, Ken, we've got exactly the same weather. Yesterday was warm, but it wasn't particularly bright. Today it's as bright as anything. And our friend Mercy Johnston is here as well. Good morning to you, Mercy. Thank you very much indeed for pitching up and being here. Yeah, let's crack on, shall we? I'm going to have to endure the awful sound coming through my ears, because I'm going to roll the intro and get this show on the road. I'm going to say a very quick good morning to Neil Edwards, formerly of this parish, who is actually watching over on Instagram. Morning, Neil. Good to see you here. How is the coast today? Or are you at home? We shall see. Demo Darv, Andy Darvell says, morning, everyone. How are we all doing on this fine hump day? Doing pretty damn well, I have to say. Chris Ford says, morning sweats. It's going to be warm. It is already warm. I've got a fan beside me, and as soon as I put a video on, I'm playing it and calling myself off. Linen shirt is doing nothing today, but it will protect me from the sun's rays while I'm watching the cricket. Anyway, people, it is Wednesday the 29th of January, good Lord. Wednesday, the 29th of July. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition, the Lord High Chancellor of live streaming, the authentic voice of the global demolition industry. In today's show, a big LiuGong in action. Yeah, we've got that for you. XCMG unveils another addition to its excavator range. Bobcat goes pro, and how Cat CVAs work with you. And in today's episode of Mark's Morning Monologue, and as I say, Dan has already kind of keyed this one up, the rise of the seat warmer. And one of the people that inspired that, Mick Norton, has just arrived, who has got a gloomy, overcast Wakefield. I'd quite like some gloomy and overcast, just to cool things down and make that ball move a little more in the air when I go to the cricket this afternoon. Dan saying it's as bright as a machine operator's ring here today in beautiful devices. I'm glad to hear it. Right, we're going to start with a bit of Caterpillar, and then we're kicking straight into a big LiuGong at work. So back after this. I'm going to have to do the show without the in-ear monitors. That's just way worse than it needs to be. Right, so big LiuGong. Let's start with that, shall we? because I've not got the monitors in, I'm actually having to watch the show. It's not bad, is it? Not bad at all. So we just had a bit of Chinese action, but you know how it is when you have a Chinese. A couple of minutes later, you fancy another one. We've got you covered after this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Yeah, from one major Chinese brand to another, we've brought you LiuGong now for XCMG and their brand new excavator. Pretty smart, but who the hell knows? Because they only ever show it in a car park. Dan Cullen. You know, you can just ask a question, right? You don't have to key it in. You don't have to say, now here's a question and then do the question. You can just start with a question. Mark Whiting is here as well. I need to press Mark's button. Not in the biblical sense. There we are. Gary Muirhead is saying it is sunny and windy up here. Good for drying out the peat. Some places are 6 meters deep, and it's all got to come out. I visited a peat bog years ago with a super wide tracked Caterpillar. It was a D6 actually, off the top of my head, from memory serves me correctly. And I'd taken lots of photographs. I was on a road looking down at it. And I thought, that's all well and good, but I could kind of do with a shot up, looking up at the machine. So I jumped off the road and into the peat bog. Well, I was definitely looking up then because I was up to my waist and stuff. Didn't even get particularly wet. It was lightly moist, I would say. But yeah, absolutely sunk up to my axles. Why do these manufacturers not make it easier to access the windows for cleaning behind the cages and the top window accessible? Some of them do. Some have got that sort of fold-out door guarding arrangement. Some of them not so much, but I do take your point. I guess there's a cost involved. You know, the high cost of hinges and stuff. Always a major stumbling block. Bobcat going pro after this.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
One mention of peat and everyone's in on the act. Dan says, Gary, get a turf machine and make turf and sell it. £5 a bag for your open fire. There you are. Money. I'm not entirely sure how your boss will feel about you carting, and I'm not sure how you're going to get it back home. I'm fairly sure that whoever's flying you from Shetland back to Glasgow is probably going to check your bags for tons of peat. But, well, there you are. Ken says, I remember working on a peat bog with a cat backhoe on timber bog mats. Yeah, I can believe that. Great heat off turf and logs in open fire. Miss the smell of it. It is quite the smell, isn't it? Yeah, funny enough, when we did the trip to see this Cat D6, we did what we needed to do, and then we went off to a local pub, and they were burning peat in there. Really, really evocative smell. You're absolutely right, Dan. Right. Bobcat going pro like this.
Change drive response to dynamic.
We've got one more film to bring you, which is about Cat CVAs, contract maintenance and that kind of thing. Do excuse me. And then we're going to get into today's morning monologue, which was basically inspired by, well, initially a comment from Mick Norton, but then subsequently by Dan and by Jim Turner as well. It's called The Rise of the Seat Warmers. I'll be bringing you that and this Caterpillar film after this. You know that thing people used to say about where there's muck, there's brass? Well, apparently where there's peat and where there's logs, there's brass. Dan says, I used to work turf all summer and sell 20 kilo bags of turf and 30 kilo bags of logs back home every winter. Used to cover 50,000 miles a year. Good luck with that. Yes, hang on a minute. It was selling for £6 a bag before euros came in. All our yesterdays, eh? Right, okay, Caterpillar CVAs, and then we'll get on to the rise of the seat warmers. Here we go.
Fact: no machine stays brand new forever. Over time, the need for condition monitoring increases. Proactive maintenance becomes even more important, and the risk of downtime, it becomes ever present in the back of your mind. Renewing your CAT customer value agreement keeps everything in motion. Planned maintenance stays on schedule. Genuine CAT parts are there when you need them. Dealer support continues without interruption. And your machine stays protected as it works and ages. If you don't renew your CVA, you risk losing momentum. No services commitment. No consistent monitoring or inspections. No protection against the wear that comes with every hour of operation. And that's where the problems start to catch up. Renewing your CVA is simple. Before your agreement expires, your dealer reaches out. You review how your machine is being used. Make any adjustments to your CVA if needed. And your coverage continues forward. No gaps, no reset, no disruption. Renewing your CVA is also valuable. The value of your CVA actually increases over time. You continue to avoid costly downtime and unexpected repairs, especially as your machine ages. You preserve your equipment's long-term value with consistent service records. And on CVAs with dealer labor, you'll stay on track for qualifications like CAT Certified Maintained. Renewing your CVA helps your equipment hold its value over time and keeps your machines performing at the level your operation depends on. Talk to your CAT dealer about renewing your CVA today.
Right, that's pretty much it for the main part of this morning show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around for that, please stay safe, look after yourself, your family, your friends and your colleagues, and I hope to see you again very soon. I'll be back tomorrow if we get more of the same. What have we got here in the chat? Something just popped up. Dan says, in my opinion, there's too much technology as these guys can be watching your every move. I feel like this ain't a good thing. What have you got to hide, Dan? What have you got to hide? There's a JCB JS130 lost forever in some bottomless peat bog up here. It went down and couldn't get it out. I don't know why that amuses me, but it kind of does. Just watching it slowly Slowly be consumed by the earth. Right, morning monologue. Let's have a bit of that, shall we? Here we go. For all the talk at trade dinners about professionalisation and world-class card schemes, anyone standing on a UK site today knows the reality on the ground tells a very different story. We can boast all we like about MVQs and ticket checks at the gate, but the plain truth is that the gap between holding a card and actually knowing how to handle a machine is a gaping and widening chasm. Walk onto any major demolition or muck shifting contract across the country, and you'll see it instantly. Hugely expensive and highly advanced equipment being piloted by people who look as if they won their competence card in a raffle. They have the plastic in their wallet, the high-vis on their back, but their ability in the cab is an embarrassment. These are the seat warmers. It's a derogatory term born of frustration used by genuine plant operators to describe individuals who are essentially there to fill a cab, satisfy a headcount, and ensure a machine keeps moving, regardless of how inefficient or clumsy that movement might be. There was a time not so long ago when a seat warmer wouldn't have lasted until the first tea break. A sharp-eyed site supervisor or a seasoned foreman would spot the jerky controls, the poor bucket positioning, or the total lack of site awareness within 20 minutes. The operator would be pulled from the cab and sent down the road. Standard practice used to mean that holding a card merely got you onto site. Your actual performance kept you there. Today, that mechanism has seemingly broken down entirely. The relentless sector-wide skill shortage has backed even the most prestigious Tier 1 contractors and specialist demolition firms into a corner. Site supervisors who ought to be monitoring standards are themselves stretched to breaking point, managing administrative red tape, environmental compliance and safety paperwork. They simply don't have the time or the bandwidth to police operator finesse. More to the point, even when a supervisor knows an operator is subpar, they often face a stark and unpalatable choice. Keep the seat warmer in the cab or let £1 million worth of equipment sit idle while project deadlines draw ever closer. This compromise is a crisis of the industry's own making. For more than a generation, construction and demolition have treated workforce planning. Let me do that again. For more than a generation, construction and demolition have treated workforce planning with a mixture of complacency and denial. We watch the average age of our skilled workforce creep steadily upwards while doing precious little to make the industry more appealing to younger generations. School leavers were steered systematically towards university degrees and desk jobs, while site work was written off as a last resort rather than promoted as a highly skilled, technology-driven career. The industry failed to invest meaningfully in entry-level pathways, relied too heavily on agency quick fixes, and watched passively as its most experienced hands retired, taking decades of muscle memory and hard-won practical wisdom with them. The chickens have now come home to roost, and they're roosting in the cabs of excavators and dozers. To keep project schedules on track, firms are turning a blind eye to obvious deficiencies in skill. As long as an operator possesses a valid card to clear their health and safety audit, management is apparently willing to overlook the skills lacking behind the levers. The consequences of this operational compromise ripple far beyond simple project delays. On a busy, high-risk demolition or muck shifting site, an incompetent operator is a constant threat. A machine operated without true control or spatial awareness puts ground workers, banksmen, and neighbouring structures at immediate risk. Modern heavy machinery is safer, more comfortable, and more advanced than ever before, but technology simply can't compensate for a lack of basic seat-of-the-pants judgment. And beyond the immediate safety implications, there's a toxic toll being taken on workplace morale. The UK demolition and plant sectors have historically been built on deep, quiet pride of workmanship. Good operators take immense satisfaction in their precision, their speed, and their ability to read a site. Today, those same experienced operators find themselves forced to act as unpaid babysitters. They spend their shifts double-checking the work of the seat warmer beside them, stepping in to fix mistakes or taking on the high-risk technical manoeuvres that their supposedly certified colleague simply can't handle. Watching a less skilled worker receive the exact same day rate while delivering half the output and double the risk is a guaranteed way to destroy on-site morale. It breeds cynicism among the veterans and sends clear, damaging message across the site. Standards and craft no longer matter. Only attendance counts. And ultimately, the phenomenon of the seat warmer exposes a deep hypocrisy at the heart of our industry. We parade our accreditation schemes, our safety charters, and our commitment to absolute competence at every conference and trade dinner. Yet when the real-world commercial pressures collide with those high ideals, the standards are quietly shelved. By allowing cards to proxy for true capability, we undermine every genuine effort made over the last 30 years to professionalise our trade. If the UK demolition and construction sectors are to regain their integrity, we need to confront the uncomfortable truth sitting in our cabs. Meeting a staffing quota with an unfit operator is not a solution. It's merely short-term borrowing against safety, morale, and productivity. Until the industry invests properly in long-term, rigorous training that prioritises actual site competence over plastic card collection, the seat warmers will continue to rise, and the true cost of our complacency will continue to grow. Thank you to Mick, to Dan, to Jim, and everyone else that inspired that. There you are. That there is the rise of the seat warmers. I hope you enjoyed it. I've got something. I've got real techno problems this morning. I don't know what's going on. There's all manner of stuff going on my screen, and I've no idea what any of it is. Right, there you are. The rise of the seat warmers. Let's have a look. Dan says seat warmers arrive now, and no clue to what they know. Yeah. See, I didn't mention that, but that is such a good point. You don't know what they know. You would like to think, that you and the 2, 3, 5, 10 guys working around you are all roughly on the same level. You might consider yourself to be a better operator than some. You might consider yourself to be on a par with some, but you'd like to think that you're all there or thereabouts. But given the nomadic way that this works, the way this industry works, and the fact that the card schemes clearly don't work, you genuinely don't know what the capabilities of your colleagues are. You would like to think we've all got our back, we're all of a standard. I can look to my left and look to my right, they're the other way around, look to my left and look to my right, and know that these guys are of the same level as me, therefore they're safe, I'm safe, we're all productive, we're all heading in the same direction. That's not necessarily the case. You don't know what they know. And that is a worry. And they don't listen to experienced operators or ask them questions. I'm reminded of when I first started going to the pub, which is a strange analogy to draw. When I first started going into a pub, it was a long while ago, obviously. Well, I was about 14 years old and I looked about 12. And I would literally sit in the corner with my pint of Foster's, wouldn't speak to anyone, wouldn't look anyone in the eye because it was so obvious that I was underage and I was just expecting to be thrown out. I wonder if we've got the same thing with some of these operators. And these are not necessarily all young operators, although I think that's sometimes the worst of the lot. I think a lot of it is down to, if I just keep my head down, mind my P's and Q's, don't do anything particularly bad, I'll probably get away with it. And given the current skill shortage and, the fact that we can't find enough proper good people, the chances are they will get away with it if they just keep their heads down. Dan says, I'm actually surprised that more serious accidents on site at the moment, but where does the failure fall? Training companies selling cars, or management for lack of awareness of their experience? I think it's everywhere. I don't think the industry, the upper echelons of the industry and their insistence upon competence cards I think they bear some responsibility. I think the training organisations bear some responsibility as well, and I think the individual companies bear responsibility. One of the things we've lost is not just the quality of the operators; it's the self-regulation. It used to be a case, the tier ones and the major contractors would insist upon a certain standard of operator, and the training organizations would do their level best, and I think they did their level best to provide that. But then there was another check in terms of the employer. The employer would look them over and make sure they were up to scratch, keep a regular eye on them and that kind of thing. I don't get the impression that's the case anymore, and I think the tier ones and the major contractors have kind of surrendered some of their responsibility. They've passed that on to the card scheme providers. The card schemes have, I don't think they act quickly enough on spurious cards and people getting their cards via spurious means. I don't think they do enough on that. And then ultimately, as I said in that article, which again was borrowed from Jim and Dan and Mick as well, you've got site supervisors who are tearing their bloody hair out trying to keep on top of paperwork. They've got head office ringing them, what's the latest? You've got clients ringing them as well. You've got to satisfy the local authority. You've got to fill in health and safety audits and Lord alone knows what else. You ain't got time to stand there and babysit somebody out in an excavator. So it passes down the line. And as we've seen, there's lots in the chat here. You end up with experienced operators, the people that have, died in the war, time served, they are looking after and looking out for those operators, which is a double whammy. Not only are those seat warmers not as productive, but now because the proper operator, who really should be productive, because he's spending half his time holding the hand of the new operator, the rookie, he's not productive either. And we've created that system, and we've propagated it, and we've nurtured it, and that's where we are today. You've got sites today where you've got people in the cab of a machine who should not be there, one way or another. They should not be there, and that's the system we've built for ourselves. Dan says the amount of operators don't even know how to use a grease gun should be an issue put to all operators. When you think about all that you need to take care of as an operator, pre-start checks, blowing out filters, grease gun, washing your windows, digging out your tracks, all of the things that come natural to an experienced operator. Are they being done? And I do believe that some of this is not just a case of people being, young and lazy. They'd rather be on their Instagram feed or whatever it might be. I think it's that they've never been taught. If you go through, please tell me if I'm wrong, but certainly when I did my backhoe loader training, I was told how to load, I was told how to dig, I was told how to drive. Nobody ever told me how to maintain the machine. Nobody. Ken saying you're not far wrong there. Thank you very much indeed, Ken. And Mick says, thanks, Mark, for another well-crafted monologue on seat warmers. Thank you very much indeed. Well, Mark, that was bloody great. Fantastic monologue. One of many. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I should rant more often. Well, I can't rant any more often. I always do it every day, don't I? So true. They jump in flat out in 2 minutes and they're all over the place and unsafe. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you've got kind of a balancing act. I mean, I said about this notion of sitting in the corner trying to watch their P's and Q's, but I think you've also got the other. I must impress. I must impress. I don't actually have the skills to impress, but God damn it, I'm going to try it. They're a danger to themselves, danger to everyone else. And their presence percolates. Obviously safety is a concern, and ultimately that should be first and foremost. Productivity will suffer, morale will suffer, fuel consumption is likely to suffer, wear and tear on the machines is likely to suffer, and so it goes on. And bearing in mind, on the one hand over here, we have these advanced technological systems, grade control and stuff, where we are desperately trying not to overwork. If you only need to dig a millimeter of soil, dig a millimeter of soil. Don't dig 5 and then have to put 4 back. Just dig a millimeter. We've put in place systems to do that. How much reworking is required because you've got a seat warmer behind the joysticks. Dan says, I always try and talk and give a little bit of advice to new operators, to which they either say, fuck off, I've done this before. I say, have you? As from what I see, you've not been listening to the briefing where you were told what you were able to and how to do it. Mick says, add to the seat warmers debacle the likelihood that the site supervisors themselves are often lacking in occupational competence and site experience. Yeah. There again, you know, I mean, this one is a real personal bugbear of mine. We took the approach sometime in the dim and distant past that everybody on site, unless they were driving a machine, needed a degree. They all had to go to university and come back with, you know, bits of paper that proved how clever they were. And they probably are. The chances are they probably are. I can't speak to that because I didn't go to university myself. But the chances are academically they're brilliant. But that does not make them suitable as a site supervisor. It does not make them a leader of men. It does not make them ready for that degree of leadership. Plus, on top of that, you've got people who are very good on the tools, very good on a machine, and so good, in fact, that somebody comes along to them one day and says, "You there on the machine? You get off. You go and sit in the site cabin and tell others what to do." There's more money involved, so the chances are they will probably say yes. But are they a leader? You know, just because you're a very good operator does not mean you're necessarily a good site supervisor or a project manager. I equate this every single time to my own profession. If you're a really, really, really good magazine journalist, chances are at some point you will be named editor. And the day you become editor, you stop writing. Exactly the same in our industry. You're a really good operator, and then you're elevated and promoted. And the day you become elevated and promoted, you stop doing the thing for which you're best known. It makes no sense. The attitude now on site is as long as it's all right, or it's not my job. Yeah. But again, I mean, it's very easy. It's very easy to sit here. I mean, bearing in mind most of us are of a certain age. I realise I'm at the top end of that spectrum, but I think most of us are of a certain age. It's very easy to point fingers of blame at the younger generation. Oh, they're lazy, they're feckless. They only want to be on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or whatever the fuck platform they're on these days. It's very easy to say that. And there is a degree of truth in that. But 10 years, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that would not have been tolerated. And the only reason, one of the major reasons it's being tolerated now is because those in middle management, the supervisors, the project managers, are busy doing other things. You know, we used to have site supervisors who would get every bit as wet and as cold as everybody else because they'd be walking around the site making sure everything was going according to plan. And now they're tucked away in a warm site cabin on a laptop, sending probably pointless emails back to the various stakeholders involved in that project. And I wonder, I'm just thinking about this out loud. That has been a development that's taken place over the last 10, 15 years. You know, site supervisors being gradually withdrawn back into site offices and site cabins. So they've lost sight of what's happening on site. Weird that that's the same sort of time that our mental health crisis happened. I'm making a huge leap here, but if site supervisors were out and about chatting with the lads on site, would we have quite such an epidemic of mental health issues? Would we have the epidemic that we've got of drug and alcohol abuse if the site supervisor, much as they used to do, were walking the site 10, 12 hours a day, were among the guys and the girls, were actually in the trenches with them? Would we have those issues now if that was still the case? Have we gained better paperwork and a worse set of working conditions? I'd love to get your thoughts. I've asked companies to be a watcher and help these new operators gain experience. Chris says, even some of the old sorts are as bad. I'm sat away from one at the moment. If I go near, I'll need another man. It's because their heart isn't in the job. And again, you know, I realise I come across as a bit of a woke old lefty, but think about the bigger picture. As I say, it's very easy to say their heart isn't in the job. And maybe it isn't. Maybe there are some amongst us who are not particularly keen to be there. They'd rather be anywhere else than sat in an excavator right now. But what if we were to go back, if we were to revert to those old site supervisors that would walk around and offer words of advice and equally encouragement? Nice word, lads. See you tomorrow. That. Do we get that anymore? I mean, I've walked on and off sites, and bearing in mind I'm generally there as a guest. I've walked on and off sites before now. Nobody's even spoken to me. So are we doing the man management, the encouragement, the cajoling that we used to have? Or are we just saying, they got a bit of plastic, go do your thing? I've got a horrible feeling it's the latter. Dan says, so many sites I've been on, never seen guys clean out tracks or regular checks. Always have to always say to guys, clean, grease, and slow down. We're not on an F1 site for excavators. Yeah. You have to want to be excuse me. You have to want to be efficient, and most folks don't give a toss, do they? I'm asking the question. I'm not countering what Jim said there. But that term, a thankless task. I know. Bear in mind, I'm self-employed, but a few people have said they've enjoyed the morning monologue today. I'll go away buzzing today. I'm going to go and sit at the cricket and bask in my own glory. Do we still get that? Are people being given that? And would you give more of a toss if you thought your boss actually had your back? Had offered you some advice that had made you slightly better, or the guy working alongside you had offered you some advice and made you slightly better. And each passing day, to this day, we're 1,179 shows in, and I still like to think, these aside this morning, I like to think that each morning gets a little bit smoother. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's 1% better than yesterday, but hopefully it's a little bit better than the last one. Maybe I'll stumble over my words a little bit less and so on down the line. I think at heart, a lot of people would be like that. I'm not saying all people, but I think a lot of people would be like that. But I don't think we have the system in place to allow that to happen. I mean, even you guys who are more experienced, when was the last time one of your bosses took you to one side and said, cracking job on that, or couldn't have finished on time without you? I don't know how you made up the time after that downpour that we had. When was the last time you had one of those? Used to be part and parcel of the job. I don't believe it is anymore. Dan says, yes, Mick, I see so many SSST operators come in and know nothing about drainage, soiling. They held a card a week and were labourer for a year. Yeah. I actually talked a guy down from going for SSSTS as he had only been an ADT for a year. My response was to stop. You have no proper experience on multiple sites. You're not working around men on the ground. Fair. And again, I was talking to the new Institute of Demolition Engineers Vice President, Stephen McCann, yesterday. Lovely fella. They're doing a lot of work outside the UK to promote the IDE overseas. And one of the things I was saying about IDE membership, it is a formal qualification. You actually have to sit an exam and everything for like that. And in order to be even considered, and there's no guarantee that being considered means you're going to go to the next stage, but even to be considered, you need 5 years. And they're even more specific than that. If in that 5 years in demolition, all you've done is take down terraced houses or toilet blocks, that's not enough. You need a more rounded experience. You need to have done a tower block, a power station, a petrochem facility, an offshore oil rig, something really, really meaty before you're even considered. Are we doing that? My belief is we're not. Chris, you and I are cut from the same cloth. Sounds like a typical day. I never know what's going on. So, listen, 1,179 episodes. Now, admittedly, this is the second set of these that I've had. These were fine yesterday. I took them off yesterday afternoon after my interview with Stephen McCann. 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, I put them down on my desk. I turned them on this morning, and all I've got is crackling. What's that about? Mick says, plant card schemes are still knocking out seat warmers purely on the strength of them passing a hermetically sealed practical test. Yeah. I mean, listen, I am the world's worst operator. Terrible. I mean, to the point where I kind of have to be cajoled into a machine. I know I'm that bad, but I reckon with a bit of studying, I could probably pass a classroom exam and get myself a card. I know I'm not up to the job. What does that tell you? That's the big issue. Supervisors are being told not to be out to tell guys and to be approachable. Yeah. Think about, and I know I always revert back to football, but think about, those maverick, rebellious players that we've had over the years. And I always think of Paolo Di Canio at West Ham. He was banned for pushing over a referee. I mean, very flamboyant, Italian, so, very expressive, bordering on mental, bordering on crazy. But he came to West Ham, and our then manager knew exactly how to handle him. Put his arm around his shoulder, tell him he was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and Paolo Di Canio for 3 or 4 seasons was the greatest player we've ever had. Precisely the same on site. Some people might need a toe up their arse in the morning. Some people might need an arm around their shoulder. Some people might need a bit of a toe and a bit of an arm, somewhere between the two. And a decent site supervisor of the old cut, the old style, would have known exactly what each of his crew needed to get through the working day. And I say again, would we have the drink, drugs, alcohol, mental health issues if the site supervisor was still out there kicking people up the arse, putting his arm around their shoulder, giving them a shoulder to cry on? Would we have it, or would it be as bad? Dan says they're not interested. They're only after the money. The rate's not interested in learning the joys of learning new things. But ultimately, what is the point? And I do feel like I'm trying to excuse the inexcusable. But if you are seen purely as a number, a seat warmer, as a number on a quota of staff, we need 10 men on this site. Don't really care whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. We just need 10 seat warmers. If that is how you're portrayed, that's how you're perceived, that is how you're treated, what reason would you have for investing your time and your effort in becoming better? If all you are is a number, why would you bother trying to be better? Because even if you go from being a pretty poor operator to being a good operator to being a really good operator, what's the difference? Chances are your pay ain't going to change. The way you're treated ain't going to change. You'll still be just an operator. So where is the encouragement? Where is the reward? Where is the carrot and stick to make you want to be better? Dan says, in Plymouth, I had that. They didn't think I would get the job hand done in the week. In the week I was there, but I never had that in such a long time. Okay. Mick says, back in the day, my mentors often said, stop there, Mick. I'll show you what I want doing and demonstrate. Yeah. Now, bizarrely with that, you will recall we had a guy called Alan Limoges from CM Labs, and they've built into their latest demolition simulator precisely that capability. You have to break some concrete, or you have to cut some steel with a breaker or with a shear or whatever it might be. So they've got all the attachments there. You can have a go, because you're not going to damage anything. You're on a simulator. You could have a go and try to teach yourself, or You can literally out loud say, I don't know how to do this, show me. And the simulator will show you which buttons to press, which levers to pull, where to position the attachment, what to do when the attachment is positioned. So as an industry, we are aware of the need to show. Don't just tell, but to show, because that is how most of us learned. It wasn't a case of, the left lever does that, the right lever does that, crack on, you're good to go. You were shown. You were mentored. And we've taken that and we've put that into something as advanced as, a surround screen simulator powered by AI. So we clearly know the benefits of show rather than tell. And yet on site, that is something that's been consigned to the history books. Make it make sense. Exactly, Mick. There's no demonstration of what they want. Now they expect you to know what they want. And again, I'll go back to that reworking thing. If you have a rough idea of what you need to do, you might do more than you need to do. You might do less. And then somebody's going to come along and say, well, that ain't what I asked for. Show us. Now, I realise with the advent of things like GPS and everything else, you can clearly see on the screen, this is what is required, which is absolutely fine if you're on a GPS machine. But how many of those rookie operators, the seat warmers, are actually on that kind of level of technology? Is that going to make them any better, or is it really going to highlight the fact that they're actually way worse than we believe they are? There's a glaring hole in all of this, and unfortunately, I, as a man of advancing age, I will gladly sometimes point out the vagaries of the youth of today, but I don't actually believe this is entirely their fault. I think they are, in some cases, taking advantage of the state of affairs, but the state of affairs is not of their making, it's of the industry's making. We've foregone some of the key founding principles that built the demolition and construction industry in favour of bits of plastic that we all know to be largely meaningless. Hang on a minute. Jim says, if you feel like you're nothing more than a number, it's up to you to speak up or jack and try another crowd. True. But again, I'll go back to my pub analogy. When I was 14 years old, tucked over in the corner of my pint of Foster's, I went to one pub because I knew I could get away with it. I wouldn't dare go to another pub just in case somebody said, "Oi, you're at school." It's going to be another 10 years before you can grow a beard. What the fuck are you thinking of? Get out. So I tucked myself away in the corner. Have we built a generation of those? And I know Jim is very keen to, speak up and speak out and, potentially throw in the towel and go somewhere else. And fine. He has the ability to do that. If you, in your heart of hearts, know that you have your competence card and your current job under at least partly false pretenses, and somebody is, regardless of your shortcomings, somebody has given you a job and you're being paid, do you really want to speak up, or would you rather just keep your head down and hope that no one notices? It's all food for thought, people. All food for thought. Right, I've got to go and get on my cricket whites. I'm not wearing cricket whites. I'm going exactly as you see me today. I'm going to go and sit in the sunshine and watch some cricket this afternoon. So I'm going to love you and leave you. Thank you ever so much for your time today. Thank you all for your comments. Oh, excuse me. Moreover, thank you once again to Jim, to Mick, to Dan, and to everybody else that commented yesterday, because you drove that whole thing. Andy says, genuine question, has this new level of automation, AI and tech like GPS and geofencing in some way devalued the role in the eyes of the companies? I think I personally think we're on the cusp of that. I think we're heading towards the point where some companies will look at it and go, Oh, never mind the monkey behind the joysticks. We'll get a machine to do it. I do think there's a degree of that. But before we get there, and I think this is where we are today, I think as it stands today, those that are able to work with that technology are actually valued slightly higher. People like Steve Williamson, who is clearly a past master with all things GPS and project management software and stuff. I think he is valued more highly because he does understand and can roll with the punches that technology brings. Fast forward 10 years, and I do wonder about that. And ultimately, we say this every time, and I hate to say it, and I do still believe that the man in the machine is likely to be the last to fall victim to AI and automation and autonomy. But I'm not saying they're immune. And there will be tasks that somebody on high will look at and say, just get the machine and do it. Dan says, true, Jim, but some people are afraid to do that in case they don't get another job for a few weeks, and they'll struggle financially. Yeah. And again, I'm not for one moment suggesting that this seat warmer mentality is entirely youth driven. But if you are relatively young, maybe you've just moved out, maybe you've got your first flat, maybe you've got your first live-in girlfriend, maybe you've just got married, maybe you've just had your first child. The last thing you want to do is to start to rock the boat. Maybe you just keep your head down, your nose clean, and hope that nobody notices that actually you're not really as good as they would like you to be. People, have a fine and splendid day. Keep an eye out for those around you, because you probably have some good operators alongside you. You may just have a seat warmer. Be afraid. See you tomorrow.